there's no better time to be alive, right? There's a lot of problems, but there's a lot of solutions. And I think as we get more and more technology, we become more and more human. And I'm adamant that we are all one conversation away. We had to use typewriters and keyboards. That seems archaic. Everything is going to conversations. And it's funny because as we looked at Star Trek, right, the way we pictured the future, nobody was typing. They were all just talking to the computer.
Right.
And that's where we are. We're back to conversations.
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempe. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Tom Schwab joining us. Tom is the founder and CEO of Interview Valet. He's a Navy veteran and engineer by training. Tom takes a systems approach to marketing that cuts through the noise. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Andy, I am thrilled to be here.
Yeah, well, in the spirit of full disclosure, Tom, the company that Tom runs provides guest flow to the Balancing Act, and we've had some really fine guests come through Tom's firm. So thank you for being a partner, Tom.
Well, thank you. I always say my microphone makes me sound good, but my team makes me look.
That's great. Could you give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story?
Well, it only makes sense in the rearview mirror, right? So here I am in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I call myself the Chief Evangelist Officer, right? Evangelizing for our company, for our clients, for the category of podcast interview marketing, right? Of using podcast as a strategic marketing channel. And as you said, there's a lot that goes behind that. It's like I spent time in the corporate world. I spent time as an engineer, but all of those things brought me to where I am right now and really looking at what the power is of conversations, especially in an AI world.
That is right. So, Tom, if you had to pick an accelerant to your career, was it growing up in Winona, Minnesota, or was it something else?
I think it'd have to be curiosity, right? I was always curious of why this, and the world was just such an amazing place. So I think it probably drove a lot of people crazy. It's definitely driven my wife crazy. But I always want to keep learning and keep experiencing.
Well, in an AI-driven world or an AI-enabled world, I'm more and more convinced that we have to somehow unlock the childhood curiosity that we were born with and was summarily snuffed out of us at like age 9. Right? We've got to ask good questions. We've got to be curious about what's going on around us and not just accept the status quo or the future will run right over us.
You were so spot on. And I think it's right around, right that 9 or 10 or something like that. I always said the kids were my best teachers right when they were around 5 years old, when they would keep asking, why? And they were curious. And if you would answer their questions, you'd learn something too. But you're right. After they hit about 9 or 10, it's like, well, this is the way life is. And you just accept it. And it's like, no, I don't want to live that way. I reject that premise.
Right. Well, Tom, I love having trained engineers on the show who have found their way into different career tracks. You earned a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy. Thank you for your service. And now you work in marketing. So I'd like to understand, how does your experience as an engineer influence the work you're doing today in what many would consider to be a really different field of work?
Well, first of all, thank you for paying for my education. And I always look at it as engineering is how the world works. It's how I see it. And especially from a business side or a marketing side, going back to first principles, oftentimes of asking, what are we optimizing for? There's so many times where people are like, oh, I can get more downloads, more likes, more impressions. And there's all these vanity metrics, and you've got to step back and say, why? What are you optimizing for? And really, from a systems perspective, people say you learn from your mistakes. I believe that's wrong. I believe you learn from examining your mistakes and your wins, right? So that point of with marketing, what's working, what isn't working, right? Let's continue to run experiments here and double down on what's working and stop with what's not working. Too often, I think we're focused on the activity as opposed to the outcome, right? And I honestly believe that the algorithms, the metrics, the dashboards that we're all being fed are playing to that, right? Then you go to paid ads and they'll tell you how many impressions you had and the engagement and all the rest of that. But the one thing they're not telling you is like, did you have any meaningful conversations? Did you have any profitable sales from it? It's like almost pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We're doing all the smoke and mirrors at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, we are talking about podcast marketing and conversations for thought leaders right now. But what you just said applies to really any part of any business. The status quo can just halt everything meaningful. We're not examining what's working and what's not. We're just kind of grinding through the day and not asking those key questions. So you really struck my continuous improvement chords there. So if you're listening to this and you're never going to launch a podcast, what Tom just indicated is valuable for whatever you are doing. So thank you for that.
Even the idea of launching a podcast, people will start with, you have to launch a podcast. You have to be a podcast guest. Well, nobody wants to do a podcast or be a podcast guest. That's a hobby, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot more fun hobbies out there. So the question is, why? Why do you want to do it? What's that? What's that core reason? And the dirty little secret in podcasting is that the majority of podcasts die within the first 10 episodes because they start it, but they don't have that why behind it. So they don't know what they're optimizing for. And so from that standpoint, to me, that's like engineering, right? What are we trying to get from this?
Yeah. Well, you are episode number 249, and next week we're celebrating 250. So we are confidently on the other side of 10. So, Tom, I like to run what I call mentorship moments. I'm going to put a hypothetical 23-year-old engineering graduate in front of you right now, kind of going back to our engineering theme at the top of the show. In the back of their mind, they're concerned that their degree choice will limit their future career flexibility. What's your advice to this engineering graduate to help them allay their fears?
I would say what you have right now is a foundation. It's not the entire career. And you have to continue to learn on that. And what will make you valuable is how you can apply your knowledge, not just that you have more and more knowledge. And, today knowledge is with AI is almost free, but the application, knowing the questions to ask, that's what's important. I had a conversation with a friend of mine that he was a computer engineer and knew computer programming back when we were in college. And he's like, now what I learned, I could probably teach a class at a museum on, right? Nobody is using the codes we were before, but it's not so much the language you're using, but it's the thought process around that. And he's like, even though I may not know the newest code, I know the thought process to get where we're going. So I think from that standpoint of wherever you are right now, I don't care if you're an engineering major, an accounting major, a finance major, an education major, right? That is the foundation. Now you have to build on it. It doesn't stop when you're 23.
Right. Thank you for that. So, Tom, 10 years ago, you wrote a book called Podcast Guest Profits, which is kind of a misnomer in itself grow your business with a targeted interview strategy. And that, I believe, is true. So you wrote this book 10 years ago. If you met somebody on the airplane or on the street who had engaged with your book, what would you want their unaided recall of the experience to be?
When I first wrote it, people would say, "What's a podcast?"
Yeah.
Now everybody's like, wow, that was like one of the OG books. And I used to think that was old guy. And then somebody told me, no, it's like original gangster. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. But what I would want them to know or to remember from it is the power of conversations, right? That this idea of throughout time, we have done business with people we know, like, and trust. We get to do that through conversation. And this idea of podcasting, right? You don't only have to be a podcast host. You could be a podcast guest and really talk to your ideal clients with that. That's the big picture. That's what I was trying to tell people 10 years ago. And it's still as powerful today, probably more powerful because, here we are in 2026. It's not only people that are listening to this podcast, but every one of them is getting indexed by AI. And that's how they're coming up with the recommendations.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as a follow-up. If you were rewriting the book here in 2026, what might be different?
It would be this whole idea of podcasts, right? Medium has changed, right? When podcasts started, it was audio only. And today, 96% of podcasts have video. And if it's a clip that's on social media, is that still a podcast? Sure, I guess, right? If somebody's using it over Sirius or XM radio, there's a lot of podcasts on there. Is that still a podcast? I don't think it's so much the medium anymore, but the message. And what's so nice about it is with technology, it allows us to create in the way that's easiest for us and then repurpose in the way that's easiest for other people.
All right, Tom, we're going to take a really short break and we'll come back and talk more about marketing in the world of podcasting. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Tom Schwab talking about the world of marketing and specifically the world of podcasting. So, Tom, I did a quick search. I check into this periodically, and there are about 850,000 business-focused podcasts globally. That's a lot of noise. Why should a business, an institution, or a senior executive be thinking about starting their own show? And as you're giving us your answer, if you've got any exemplars that you can share with us, folks that are doing it right or businesses that are doing it right, that would be great.
And it's this idea of the world doesn't need another podcast. The world doesn't need another business, right? If it's just a copy of something else. What it needs is a new viewpoint, a new point of view on how to solve the world. So, as you said, there's, depending what you look at, 850,000 podcasts. I don't know how many blogs there are, 10 million blogs, but still people are out there. And if your goal is just that I want to be bigger than Joe Rogan, okay, that's fine, but chances are that's not obtainable for most people. And I would say most people, it wouldn't serve their interests from that. If we look at this as the ability to talk with people, right? It's just another medium to do that. So if you think about, most business owners I talk to, they're like, yeah, when I talk with the right people, I get business. They understand that, right? And how do you do that? Well, it used to be going to the Chamber of Commerce and speaking, going to a conference, right? I've just last month, I flew to Texas, to talk to 200 people. And that was like 3 or 4 days out of my life. You can look at now as a podcast. Well, you can talk to your people, and that could be your clients. It could be your leads, right? That's a great reason to have a podcast of your own to um, to be able to talk to your current audience. That's the reason we have one. I pushed back on doing a podcast for probably 8 years, and then all of our podcast episodes really became, hey, here are common questions that our team has, that our clients have. So it was almost like an internal education that we were opening up for others. Um, there's other ones where they'll just leverage the podcast for their audience, or even internally for their employees. I've seen that done. And what's really interesting right now is how you can make it hyper focused, right? So it doesn't matter if you've got 2 million people listening to your podcast like Joe Rogan, right? What impact is it making on those people? And there's now talk of doing, almost niche podcasts. So if somebody comes back and, they have a question, you could be able to pull from your, over 200 episodes, right? And they could get the information from there. So it's not this idea of we need more, but I think it's that we need different, we need better, and not just more noise.
Yeah. Who's doing it well?
I think the ones that are really focused on the problem. There's one that I really like called Follow Your Different with Christopher Lochhead. Is very eclectic, but he's always following on the problem. I think some of the ones now with podcasting, it's more gotten to celebrity, right? And it's the same thing as the Johnny Carson show or the Tonight Show, right? Where he's got the same group of people going through saying the same things. I don't think that's interesting anymore, right? I look at the ones that have guests that you may have not have heard of before, but they are a great interviewer. Lex Friedman is one that I love. Here you've got
Lex.
a
Yeah.
super, super educated guy, and he brings in the most eclectic people, and he does a lot of research, right? I would not listen to a Joe Rogan interview for 3 hours, but Lex Friedman, I heard him interview the Prime Minister of India. I hope I got that right. The Prime Minister of India. I learned more from that, and I actually stopped listening to it at 2x. It's like I slowed it down because I wanted that. There's another one that's called Hardcore History. George, I was going to say George Carlin. It's not George Carlin.
No longer with us.
No, I'd listen to George Carlin's podcast. His last name's Carlin. And he just has a great way of explaining history. And some of his podcasts can be 8 hours long. And granted, you don't listen to them all at once, but when you finish that 8-hour podcast, you start thinking, when's the next one going to come out? Because it's this medium that is so interesting, because we can listen to it when we want, where we want, at the speed we want. And so I think the people that are doing it differently, I think those are the ones that are standing out. The ones that, it's the same guests talking the same talking points. It's just more noise.
Yeah. Well, let's do our second mentorship moment. I'm going to put a CEO of a mid-sized business in front of you right now. They've convinced themselves that, quote unquote, leading from the back is the right call, and they've resisted developing any kind of public persona. What's your advice to this individual to help them see the benefits of curating their public voice?
Well, this was me probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, because I didn't want to have my face out there. It wasn't about me. Honestly, I was just uncomfortable with it. I didn't want to lead from the front. And I look back at my military training, then you're not leading. And there was a gentleman that really helped me with this, Rick Bennett. He wrote a lot of great copywriting in his time. And he said something. He says, God hates a coward, and the market ignores them. So this idea, if I'm going to stand in the back and not be the evangelist for my company, well, who else is, right? The team is looking for a leader. The the clients are looking for a leader. The market is looking for a leader. And I was at a conference one time for Entrepreneurs Organization, and I'll never forget, the woman said that if you look at any big company, be it Tesla with Elon Musk or Virgin with Sir Richard Branson, that the leader always has 10 times the following of the company. And then she asked the people in the audience, is this true for you? Take 3 minutes and figure it out. And it was. It tracked. So this idea of, instead of telling your marketing team that they've got to build up the social media, well, why don't you lead by example? Instead of telling other people you should do this, why don't you lead by example? Because today, people buy from people. They don't buy from just brands. And AI is the same way there. And I'll give you a great example. Gavin Zaklinski. Gavin's the founder of Calendly. I'm sorry, of Acuity Scheduling. And Acuity Scheduling was bought by Squarespace. It was their first acquisition. And Gavin built his entire company around going out on podcasts and saying, this is why I built it. My mom was having this problem. And so I built this scheduling app for her. And then her friends started to use it. And then I added these features. Now, is there a difference between Acuity and Calendly and Schedule Once? I don't know. They probably all do about the same thing, right? But because I knew Gavin's story, I knew his heart, I knew the people that were behind that, I never turned off that. And when they were looking to acquire a business, that's one of the things they looked at. And his customer base was loyal to him. Whereas, Schedule Once and Calendly, if somebody was a penny cheaper, would they switch? So I think that's an important part, that are you really leading from the back, or are you just, what's the right word for it?
Well, afraid to put yourself out there.
Put yourself, or just this idea of refusing to lead, right?
All right, Tom, what have we not talked about today that you want to make sure that our listeners take away?
I think one of the big ones is, where's the world going? Right? Are we all going to be replaced by AI? There's a lot of scary stuff going on in the world, but there's no better time to be alive, right? There's a lot of problems, but there's a lot of solutions. And I think as we get more and more technology, we become more and more human. And I'm adamant that we are all one conversation away, right? When we had to use the telegraph to talk to people, we look back at that and say, that was so archaic. And then, paying for phone calls, having to wait till 11 o'clock to talk with somebody, that seems archaic. And I think we're going to get to the point, Andy, where we're going to look back and we had to use typewriters and keyboards. That seems archaic. Everything is going to conversations. And it's funny because as we looked at Star Trek, right, the way we pictured the future, nobody was typing. They were all just talking to the computer. And that's where we are. We're back to conversations.
Excellent. Well, Tom, let's wrap up with some lightning round questions, if you're willing and able.
Yes.
All right. Well, Tom Schwab, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I'm going to have to go with anything that says pediatric. If it's juvenile diabetes, those two words should not go together. Pediatric cancer, those two words should never go together, right? So anything with kids, that's where I would put a whole lot more than 50%.
Awesome. Okay, second question. If I give you access to a really small time machine and you can send a message to an earlier version of Tom Schwab, what's the message and what previous version of yourself do you send it to?
I think I would send it back to myself when I was probably, 19, 20 years old, right? It was all about knowledge. And I would say that knowledge is a part of it, but relationships are the ultimate currency, right? It's through all of these years, inflation has never touched relationships. If anything, they're getting more and more valuable with time.
Excellent answer. Tom, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Um, I'm focused on energy. And we will run out of time, but one of my clients pointed out we really run out of energy, right? I've got the extra time at the end of the day, but I'm usually just too tired. So it's like I'm trying to focus on what I can do that brings me energy, trying to be intentional with that because there's a lot of impact that we can make in the world today. And I just want to make sure that I've got the energy to use the gifts I've been given.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your contributions to our listeners today, Tom. It was great to get to know you.
Thank you, Andy.
Right. My name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find the show on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your family, a neighbor, and maybe a colleague at work. The show is produced by Nick Tempty, and we'll see you next week on The Balancing Act.